Hello, my name is Marlene Weisenbeck. I'm a Franciscan sister of Perpetual Adoration and the convener of the La Crosse Task Force to End Modern Slavery. As the second largest criminal activity in the world, we encounter human trafficking wherever we are, globally and locally. As you view these stories, I ask you to gaze upon the person. Consider the burden that she or he is carrying. Contemplate each situation, and then imitate others who are helping to move them out toward healing and wholeness. Gaze. Rest your eyes on what you see and hear. Experience this visual evidence of persons who are captured and terrorized through the strategies that brought them into the life of modern slavery. Though your eyes and thoughts may be drawn elsewhere, bring them back to the person that is the focus of each story. Consider. Allow your mind to study and understand the horrific situations that brought these individuals into their captivity. Consider the humiliation to which victims are submitted. Deepen your knowledge of the events that made them vulnerable to recruitment into this life. Do you sense a challenge or a call? Contemplate. Be present to what you see and hear. Listen with your inner senses to the meaning of the story. Listen to the cries of the enslaved without judgment. Then embrace an unceasing prayer for all those involved and all those who work to bring freedom to those in this underground economy of evil. Finally, imitate. All prayer moves us toward making efforts to create relationships of wholeness worthy of our God-given human dignity. Join in some way with others in bringing hope and freedom to the suffering world. Thank you.
I feel pretty sad. I feel very sad about the experiences that so many women have had to endure as very young women. I feel very sad that there's a thread in these abusive stories that we heard from so many women about, and that thread was not having a father figure in the home. And that was my case as well. My father left my mother. I didn't get into the life till I was much older, but I was sexually abused at 15, and that's what planted the seed. But I think it's really sad that men don't stick with their families. I think it's really sad that a lot of our children don't get the love that they need, and they feel the need to look elsewhere. You know, we hear that term, daddy issues. And it's really important. I didn't believe this for years. I thought, I'm fine. My father, when he left our family, it didn't really affect me. It might have affected my younger siblings and my mother, but it really did affect me. And it's more than 50% of our population comes from divorced households, and that's very, very sad. What else was very sad was that being a female, being a mother, being a caretaker, I wish I was there. I wish I could have intervened for these girls at some point so that they didn't have to go through the abuse that they went through. I wish somebody would have intervened for myself. But I'm also, it's very sad listening to the Johns and the John and the pimp as well. Knowing that those same dynamics of evil were present in their lives, just as they were with the young girls. The fact that in this culture today that most of the music that our young kids listen to glamorizes pimpology, that there are actually books and websites that you can go on to learn how to become a pimp, that there are even video games called Grand Theft Auto, where in that game, if a player has sex with a prostituted woman in the video game, they get extra energy, and if they kill her, they even get more. That to me is sick. This is what our kids are exposed to at an early age. The fact that pornography is online now and so easy to access and free. The other thing is if the man is out of the home, if the father figure is out of the home, more and more men and women are learning about sex on the streets. A lot of our young men, like the pimp we talked to, when his father left, or had many other women, as he said, then there is all that confusion, and that lends to us thinking that it's okay for a man to leave the family. It's okay, it's natural, it's normal. Well, it shouldn't be. And looking for love in all the wrong places. Boys and girls both need love growing up. We know that. Sure. So with the boys having their father figure removed from the family, they're going to tend to look for other boys in the neighborhood, gangs maybe, depending on where you grew up. So to join a gang, to feel accepted, to feel part of something is a natural order for a lot of these guys that are on the streets. So I can see how these pimps were brought into the life as well. There was a period in my life where I hated pimps. You couldn't convince me that they were also bred into this life. You could not convince me of that. I thought that they were natural-born sociopaths. That's not the case for most of them. I'm sure there are.
What made you change your mind?
What made me change my mind was one of my staff. She said to me, "Terry, how dare you call yourself a Christian, and how dare you not take a look at what these perpetrators have been through?" Because she grew up in, I believe, she grew up where she saw a lot of pimps be groomed as well. And when she broke it down for me, I just sobbed and thought to myself, yeah, you know, they were groomed just as much as the women were groomed. Mm-hmm. Now, and one of the things he was talking about was, that we heard a lot about, was the drugs and the alcohol. Obviously, drugs and alcohol serve as a way to get out of the feelings that you're feeling, a way to escape, a way to disassociate from hurt in your lives. But what it does is it does ease the pain for a while, but you can't ever catch that dragon. So somebody like me that used for 30 years, it takes a big toll on your body. But that's also a stronghold in itself, addiction. And if you don't feel what you're supposed to feel, you're not going to heal. So a lot of times, and then there's confusion with the drugs and the alcohol. We tend to be in situations where we might not normally be in had we been sober, and we could make more safe decisions. So I can certainly see how the pimp is also brought up in the lifestyle and how they're groomed. And whereas don't understand all the aspects. I can certainly have an open mind and look at, the pimps' lives and what they went through.
I just would like to interject here. Terry, you mentioned that the drugs were used to deal with the pain. Now, I just want to put this into perspective because there's already pain from the childhood upbringing that you described.
For some.
For some. And there's also the pain of the lifestyle
Absolutely.
that they're getting into. So, correct me, am I hearing you say that the drugs and alcohol is being used to mask or deal with the pain from both sides?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Now, my drug use started right after I was abused by my boss at 15 years old. And I had a number of traumas that happened at the same time as a 15-year-old young girl in the 70s. During that time, cocaine was glamorized. Eric Clapton had that big song about cocaine.
And what brought you into the life?
What brought me in was...
I know you've had all that trauma, but what was the trigger?
The nervous breakdown, the divorce, not knowing how to get over it, started going to treatment centers, one after another. You've heard many of our women have gone to 10, 12. I went to 12. In each one of those treatment centers, I learned a little something, a little more than the last one. However, I never, ever got to the point where they wanted to find out where that root came from. Why did I start using drugs? What was the event that made me start using drugs? It was that rape. It was my boss who did it. I was 15, he was 28. I didn't say anything at the time because I was afraid. I just, froze and didn't say anything. So I didn't consider it rape until just a couple of years ago when I realized that is what it was. I never gave him permission, but I never said no, so I blame myself.
Well, one of the things that I'm hearing is that you've survived a lot of things.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, the survival piece. So I'm glad I went through the cancer because the girls, my clients that come here and say, I have cancer now. I want to just die on the vine. No. I went through it. You can go through it. And this is just one more thing. This is life. It's not fair. No one said it was fair. But we can use what we've gone through to help others. And being a survivor-led organization, my staff, 90% of them are survivors, and the one that's not is at risk, high risk because of familial dynamics. But she's not going to be in the life. But and then too, we know that 69% of the women that are in the life are women of color. Most of my staff is African American. There are 2 Caucasian and there are 6 African Americans.
What makes the African American women more vulnerable?
One has to do with the demographics. A large part of that has to do with most of the women that are African American that come into our program are at 100% poverty, have grown up in a disenfranchised environment, come from generational prostitution. So it could have been their mother, their aunties, that it's normal, like our pimp talked about, it's normal in the community, so you're more likely to get sucked in. They had sisters or someone else. 80% of our women were sexually abused before the age of 10. A lot of men like to use women of color because they perceive them as exotic and erotic and something, taboo, but I want to be part of that. It's going to be exciting. But I'm not bringing her back to my parents. She's just going to be used as an object. And it's very, very sad. But across the board, I think in most communities you'll find a greater proportion of women that are women of color. And in the state of Minnesota, only 6% of our women are African American, or 6% of the state population is African American. And to have 69%.
That's high.
Now, one of the things I do want to point out that I think is
high.
It's very high. One of the things I do want to point out is that Johns, the purchasers of sex, falls almost identical with the 2010 census. So 85% of our population is white. 85% of the men that purchase sex are white. 6% are African American. 6% of our Johns that purchase are African American. 3% are Asian. 3% of the Johns. So it's interesting how the Johns, the men, it doesn't matter, but the women it does. But, you know, we're a white culture, so the average John looks like this. 47-year-old man who's married, has a bachelor of degree or higher, makes $75,000 a year or more, is married, has children, at least one of them is a girl, and does not have a criminal record, and does not live in a 5510 or 5540 area code, which would indicate that it was an inner city. They live in the suburbs. Yeah. So,
so what message would you give to families, to the American families today?
What I would say is that nobody is exempt from sex trafficking. That you need to love your children. Children are not a commodity. Children need to be, you have to engage in your children's upbringing. Love your children. Love yourself. You can't love someone else if you can't love yourself. Be careful. Watch out for your kids. Watch out what they're doing. Know who they're on that line with. Know who they're talking with on Facebook or their social media. Look at their friends. Know their friends. Find out if there's a change. All of a sudden, if there's a change in friends, or if they're starting to go out with older men. That's the other commonality we heard with all the women today. They were all older men. There's no reason whatsoever that a teenager should be going out with someone in their 20s. None. There's something wrong with that man in more ways than one. So make sure that that doesn't happen. If there's a sudden change of friends, if your daughter all of a sudden, or son even, because boys are trafficked as well, don't come home for Thanksgiving or start hanging out with other friends or start coming home with Coach purses or Tory Burch or something you know that they can't afford. You know, that's a big red flag. If they start dressing more provocatively, if they're more secret on the phone, if they're going to more parties or, you know, things like that that are just out of the norm for them, keep an eye on that. Now, that could be indicative of a lot of different things. It could be maybe some drug use. It could be, you know, other sexual activity that's not prostitution related. Who knows? But it's a good time to have a conversation regardless.